Every year on December 25th, I add a new game to the channel, so it is time to start playing Pokemon HeartGold. Please go easy on me during this series, because this is the second time in my entire life that I have played this game. The only other time was when I came back to play all the Pokemon games I had missed in adulthood after I completed university. And that was back in like 2015, so it has almost been a decade. Either way, here are my standard rules. Now, I'm gonna make some adjustments for these in 2025, and there are some specific things that we're gonna have to talk about in HeartGold, but that's what this video is all about. Now, I'm also very curious, is HeartGold the upgrade that these games needed for solo challenges? Because of all the games that I'm playing so far on my channel, Crystal is by far the least interesting. There is so much curse, protect, return spam in the late game, and most strategies centralize around the powerful normal type move, or they centralize around hidden power, which allows most Pokemon to solve the problems in their way. These remakes are fairly faithful, so I'm anticipating that a lot of the same problems will exist. But you will be happy to know that Curse is no longer a TM, and Red's Pokemon, well, they're all at higher levels. I don't know why Game Freak thought that he wasn't difficult enough, but yes, he is going to be even harder in HeartGold. Okay, so if you're watching a TV show, there's usually an A plotline and a B plotline. The A plotline is one of the major characters pushing the primary plot forward, whereas the B plotline is like his sidekick falling in love with a side character and then getting brutally rejected. It's maybe played for comedic effect, in contrast with the serious main plotline. Just like that, in this video, there are going to be two plotlines. The primary plotline is going to be seeing how I do with the Meganium-line in a standard solo challenge, and the secondary B plotline is going to be talking about the modifications I have had to make to the game. If you haven't been watching my channel for very long, you won't know that I have changed a bunch of things about these games sort of subtly under the surface to make all of the Pokemon species more comparable in my final tier list. And of course, we're going to do a tier list in HeartGold and Soul Silver. My goal is to rank every species in solo runs of every single main series game. If that is my goal, then a bunch of things need to be derived from it which are logically coherent. So I'm not going to be able to complete all of these playthroughs if I don't do it in a time-efficient way. And because of that, I've had to adjust for certain types of RNG in these solo challenges. I'm going to talk about that as well as other ROM modifications that I've made for HeartGold as I go throughout this solo run. Just so you know, if you want to play the same run that I did today, I have left a link to my solo running Discord in the description, and you can find the patch file there. Okay, let's start talking about the solo challenge. Like all of my first attempt series in later generations, I am starting with the first Pokemon and evolving throughout the run. I'm also going to be using exclusively hardy natures, and I am banning hidden power. I think this keeps things interesting, levels off the difficulty curve a little bit while I'm still learning the game, and it provides us an opportunity to still dive into this series while reserving videos like Typhlosion versus Meganium versus Feraligatr for later on. Okay, so we're starting with Chikorita today. It has a medium slow growth rate, which is fantastic for a solo challenge, but its stats are really not that good. It is by far the worst of the Johto starters. In everything except design, I think Chikorita is so cute, and people make fun of this thing, but like, it is adorable, by far my favorite design. For base stats, it has 45 HP and speed, 49 attack and special attack, and 65 defense and special defense. If you have ever wanted a reason why the stats should be laid out in these rows and columns, just look at Chikorita's stats. It is so beautiful. Okay, so for ability, we have Overgrow, which means every time I'm under 33% hit points, Chikorita is going to do 50% more damage with grass-type moves. In terms of starting moveset, we get Tackle and Growl, and then Razor Leaf at only level 6. Beyond that, the Chikorita line gets a lot of defensive moves. Poison Powder, Synthesis, Reflect, Light Screen, Safeguard, things like this. And that obviously synergizes well with its defensive stats. And I think this is why a lot of people really don't like it as a Pokemon. It is a slow defender, and as a starter Pokemon, that's not really what you want. Because of the same type attack bonus, once I start fighting Pokemon like Pidgey, Razor Leaf is the better move to choose when compared with Tackle. Although that isn't the case inside of Bellsprout Tower, where their Pokemon doubly resist the grass type move. Now I need to mention this location because in HeartGold and Soul Silver it is mandatory, unlike in Pokemon Gold, Silver, and Crystal. I'm going to go over all the changes, but I'm reserving that as a B plot for another video in this series, because starting today there are going to be 7 HeartGold videos in a row. We've got a lot of time to talk about other things. For today, it's ROM modifications specifically. Well, and of course, Chikorita's journey. Luckily, no problems in Sprout Tower, but I do have to go up against a flying type specialist next. And Falkner's team is much better in HeartGold and Soul Silver when compared with Crystal. One subtle change that could benefit me here is the fact that Falkner's gym has a way around the optional trainers, so Birdkeeper Abe is no longer mandatory. I still decided to fight him because I was trying to get Chikorita to level 16. Luckily, his Spearow isn't a problem. Birdkeeper Rod that follows doesn't give me enough experience, so I have to go into the battle against Falkner at only level 15. One level prior to Chikorita's first evolution. Okay, quickly before we jump into the Falkner battle, I have to make one small edit here and disclaimer for all of you watching at home. When I was recording this series, I didn't notice initially that all of the abilities on the trainers teams are wrong in the cases that those Pokemon can have two abilities. If the Pokemon only has one ability available to it, then those are correct, but you'll see some things like Machamp later on having Guts where it should have no guard. I just wanted to flag that now because we can't fix it in the footage. This error is going to exist in the first 5 videos of the HeartGold series before we caught it and then fixed it with a data update. Thanks for understanding. Okay, now let's get into Falkner. Okay, look at Falkner's team. His Pidgey does not have Mud Slap anymore, which is a downgrade. It now has Sand Attack, but his Pidgeotto has Tackle, Roost, and Gust. This means it can heal, and his Pokemon are also at higher levels. The Pidgey, instead of being level 7, is now level 9, and the Pidgeotto, instead of being level 9, is now level 13. My moveset for this battle is Razor Leaf, Tackle, Poison Powder, and Synthesis. I think the last of these moves is incredibly important. It's going to allow me to keep up with the Pidgeotto as it uses Roost. Now, another thing about this flying type recovery move is that when it's used, the flying type is no longer factored into damage calculations, meaning that Razor Leaf is going to do neutral damage. This is an edge case I haven't programmed around yet, so my overlay isn't going to display any changes, but just know that they're happening in the background. The Pidgey is very easy to take out, and I move on to the Pidgeotto. Okay, so Falkner says the wind is finally with us. I hope not. And he was right, because Gust then gets a critical hit, doing massive damage, bringing Chikorita down to 14 hit points. I went for Poison Powder because I want to get chip damage every turn as I slowly take out his ace. But I was pretty sure he was going to knock me out with his next hit. However, my defensive starter survives with 2 hit points and gives me a chance to use Synthesis. This battle slows down from here because I have to heal twice in a row to go back to full health. Falkner also heals up his Pidgeotto, but then I get to attack, and Razor Leaf does a lot of damage. After Poison, his ace is sitting around half health. Gust isn't doing that much, but now that he hasn't used Roost, my attacks aren't either. But if he does, they'll do more damage, so his Roosts are effectively neutralized. And with the damage of Poison Powder plus my chip attacks every turn, his ace goes down, and Chikorita takes an easy victory, leveling up to 16, where it evolves for the first time into Bayleaf. In my opinion, one of the best second stage starters of all. I just really wish Meganium had taken more design cues from this thing. Like, the leaf on its head should have just got bigger, maybe been more intimidating in some way, I don't know. This evolution brings with it modest stat changes, roughly plus 15 in everything, with the exception of Special Attack, which gets plus 14, and Attack, which gets plus 13. On my way south to Union Cave, I pick up the Miracle Seed, which is a held item that increases the power of Grass-type moves. Unlike in Generation 2, where these items increase the power by 10%, starting in Generation 4, they increase the power by 20%. This brings Razor Leaf's effective power against neutral targets up to 99. Alright, let's talk about the first HM user in Pokemon HeartGold. I need something that can use Cut, so I have a few options available to me, but today I catch myself a Bellsprout. Another alternative is Rattata, which can learn Cut in these games, or potentially something like Sandshrew found inside of Union Cave. As I make my way to Union Cave, I fight as many trainers as I can. I need to level up significantly before taking on Bugsy. His team is so much better, just like Falkner's, but I'll leave it as a surprise as to what the changes are. For now, I'm doing as much training as I can in order to level up. Okay, this is where we get to the first ROM modification that I've used. Just north of this Pokemon Center, you'll see that there's a little lady standing here hidden by the trees. She is one of the Day of the Week siblings, and she only shows up here on Friday because her name is Frida. She gives the player the Poison Barb, so today I walked over to her and then realized Meganium, as a grass type, does not have the secondary type Poison, and it's not going to learn Sludge Bomb, so it's essentially useless to pick up this held item. But it does give me a chance to talk about these NPCs, because they are really annoying when considering solo challenges. Because I'm human and I need to do things like eat and use the washroom, I allow myself to pause while doing these solo challenges. Here's the thing about that though. If I'm allowing myself to pause, then potentially I can just walk inside of the Pokemon Center, pause the game, wait until it's Friday, unpause the game, and then go and talk to Frida, picking up the Poison Barb. I could do this for every single weekday event in the games. It would just take me like 4 weeks to play these challenges, and it would not be that much fun. So because of how pausing works with my rule set, I allow myself to get any of these events regardless of the day of the week that it currently is. In Pokemon Crystal, the way it works is my overlay dynamically assigns the day of the week when I enter one of these locations, the person spawns, and then I can grab the held item from them. But in HeartGold, it's a little bit trickier to do this, so I'm going one step further and making a ROM modification, just removing the check for the weekday whenever one of these people is talked to. This way I can pick up any of these held items whenever I want them. Now, this is a byproduct of the fact that I allow myself to pause, but it also uncovers something else. The fact that when I do these solo challenges, I want to give the Pokemon the best possible result I can. This is a combination of player skill, but also how the game assigns the Pokemon various things like IVs. In my solo challenges, I am running perfect Pokemon, so my Bayleaf right now has 31 in every single one of its stats. And realizing this is going to play into the next modification that I make, which is not technically a ROM modification, but it feels like one. We're going to have to clear Azalea Town to talk about that though. Once arriving in Union Cave, I find myself a Sandshrew and I catch it as my second HM user. This clued me into the fact that I can backtrack and pick up the HM for Rock Smash. The reason I'm doing this is because there's a new rare candy available inside the Ruins of Alph. You're probably also going to be curious where all of these items are, because there are many more in HeartGold when compared with Crystal. But I'm going to save talking about their locations for tomorrow's B-plot, because they're going to be much more relevant in that video. Anyways, since I teased it now, there is this one hidden behind this Rock Smash boulder in the Ruins of Alph. On my way through Union Cave, I battle the trainers, gaining as much experience as possible, and then I make it to Azalea Town and Slowpoke well. In terms of type effectiveness, Bayleaf isn't great here. It has to take its time knocking out Pokemon like the Zubat. Luckily for me, they're just kind of bad, so it doesn't really matter. I'm just going slowly. With them defeated, I head into Bugsy's gym, which has had a major redesign. We now have these little like spider carts that you like jump on and move across this like weird boarded area. I don't really know how to describe this. It's almost like an amusement park ride. It's not really a difficult puzzle. Just choose the left cart, then the center cart, flip a switch, flip another switch, and then go to Bugsy. And I think this fight might be the most difficult spot in this entire playthrough. And yes, I am including red in that. So let me demonstrate to you why the bug type specialist is going to be so difficult. In Crystal version, he starts with a Metapod, allowing you to set up for free. But in HeartGold, he leads with his Scyther. This actually makes a ton of sense because it doesn't have Fury Cutter anymore. Instead, it has U-turn. So it comes in, then it U-turns out and sends in one of the cocoons, which just makes so much sense. Also, both of the cocoons no longer have their bad moves like Harden. Instead, they just have Poison, Sting, and Tackle. In this case, that's actually really bad because he's going to be U-turning into the Kakuna, which can then poison me. This situation is also made more complex by the fact that the Scyther is going to use Focus Energy, increasing its chance to critical hit. Making things even worse, it also knows Leer. Essentially, everything here synergizes well for Bugsy. He's never going to be using useless moves. The worst move on his entire set is Quick Attack, and that could be useful if my Pokemon outspeeds his lead. But right now that's not the scenario. Scyther has 42 speed and Bayleaf has 38. My strategy here was using Reflect in combination with Synthesis to set up my defense and then be able to heal, but this isn't a great idea because Tackle isn't doing very much damage. Scyther uses some quick attacks, it has a Citrus Berry as well, making things even worse. And in this case, it doesn't even use U-turn once, and instead just finishes me with Quick Attack. Okay, I tried again. This time Scyther goes for U-turn right away, doing half to Bayleaf. Alright, that is not good. I go for Synthesis on the Kakuna, but again, it has Poison Sting, so it poisons Bayleaf, and now I'm taking chip damage every turn. It takes some time to knock out the Kakuna, because I don't have moves that are good against it. By the time Scyther comes in, I am once again at around half health. It gets pumped with Focus Energy, once again lowers my defense with Leer, and then takes the win. I think the rival might actually be easier than Bugsy, so let's face him now and see if I can get some extra experience. I have to two-shot the Ghastly using Razor Leaf, which is a little bit sketchy sketchy because it does no curse, which is a difference from Crystal version. Luckily for me, it does not use this move, so I don't have a volatile status condition for the remainder of the battle. Well, until the Zubat comes out and confuses me. I take my time here healing with Synthesis before the Quilava comes in. I figured this would be bad, but it lowers my defense with Leer, which makes very little sense when its only good move is Ember, which is special in Generation 4. My hits with Razor Leaf are doing decent damage, and the Quilava just kind of drops the ball, lowering my defense 4 times in a row before I knock it out. If anyone has insight into the Generation 4 AI and why this happened, please let me know. I am so curious. Okay, facing Bugsy now doesn't make sense. Let's level up more over the next damage rounding threshold at level 23. I'm also going to take this opportunity to backtrack to the Ruins of Alph, because if you didn't know, inside the little puzzle rooms, there is also a hidden room, which can be obtained by doing a specific action right in front of where the door will appear. For this building, the action is using an escape rope, and then the door opens and you can go in and grab some items. By the way, I didn't know this, but these rooms exist in Pokemon Crystal. I have literally never opened one of them up in my entire life, and I had no idea they existed until Exceptional told me about these rooms in HeartGold. Inside this one are 2 berries, which are actually quite hard to obtain in Pokemon HeartGold. The apricorns are on all the trees that you see scattered around the region. There are actually no berries that you pick up through conventional means. So the first way to obtain berries is inside of this hidden room. And the 2 that I get here have the potential to be helpful against Bugsy. First is the Pecha Berry, and then second is the Oran Berry. Maybe the small amount of healing that this berry gives me will be enough to overcome Bugsy. And if not, I can switch over to the Pecha Berry and heal the status condition that Kakuna can sometimes dish out. Okay, so the Oran Berry is really not that good. It only heals 10 hit points, which is roughly 1/7 of my HP at level 23. Being over a damage rounding threshold doesn't really help a lot when you're doing this little damage to a Scyther, and once again, Focus Energy plus U-Turn are just too much. The critical hit does devastating damage and Bayleaf faints. Okay, so I have to start thinking about alternate approaches to winning this battle. Of course, evolving into Meganium is just out of the question. That happens at level 32. But before that, I'm going to get access to another move which can really help me out. It's called Natural Gift. I recently described this move in Pokemon Platinum when I was using it with Arceus, but I'll just quickly describe it again. Essentially, the base power and the type of the move are determined by the held berry that the Pokemon currently has. When the move is executed, the berry is consumed, and then the move cannot be executed again. This essentially gives me 1 turn of damage against the Scyther, which can be super effective, because when holding a Pecha Berry, the type of natural cure is electric. Thing is, to get this move, I have to level up to 26, which takes some time when I'm fighting weak Johto Pokemon. I don't have to train all the way though, because I have 1 rare candy, which is only available in HeartGold, so I can use that to go from 25 up to 26 before taking on Bugsy again. So I go into the fight holding the Pecha Berry, making Natural Gift a 120 effective power move that deals physical damage when used against the Scyther. I didn't want to go for it right away in case he U-turns into the Kakuna and then poisons me. And he does exactly that, so then the Pecha Berry is consumed here against the Kakuna. As soon as it happened, I was a little bit disappointed because I really wanted to hit the Scyther for massive damage, but I'll have to make do without. I heal up a little bit, go into the battle against his ace once again. This time though, I'm in a much better position. I take it down to very low health and then it U-turns, but Bayleaf survives with 3 hit points and his Metapod comes in, which is perfect. I can take my time here healing with Synthesis before the Scyther comes back out. Bayleaf of course is faster, it moves first, hits, and knocks out his ace. At long last, Bugsy is defeated. And this is a major victory, because on the other side of the forest, things are going to change. Before that though, I'm going to talk to the Headbutt tutor inside the forest. Unlike all of the other move tutors in most of these games, he can be used infinitely to teach this move to as many Pokemon as you want. The only difference is that it's no longer a TM, so I can't take it into the league with me and then teach it more flexibly later into the game. But this is a major upgrade when compared with Tackle as a go-to normal type move. But of course, it's not the major difference I was referring to before. So let's head into Goldenrod City and talk about some of the major modifications that I have made in HeartGold for these solo challenges. The first one comes in the form of Voltorb Flip. Let's just pause the footage as I obtain the coin case, because we need to talk about this minigame and I need to vent about it. If you don't already know, Voltorb Flip is the only game you can play in the game corner now, and it is the only way you can earn coins. Yes, in HeartGold, you cannot buy coins anymore. The developers must have done this to try and wall off the TMs that you can obtain behind behind them because they're honestly fantastic. Substitute, Swords Dance, Rest, Flamethrower, Ice Beam, and Thunderbolt. Plus you can buy some good Pokemon, Abra for Teleport and Dratini for Surf, Whirlpool, and Waterfall. In addition to this, you can also buy fantastic held items, the Silk Scarf, the Wide Lens, the Zoom Lens, and the Metronome. This is where I run into what I can only describe as like philosophical problems with solo running these games. Is it okay to play Voltorb Flip? My answer would obviously be yes if the game was purely skill-based, but it isn't. There is skill involved, but there is also a lot of luck. Now before starting this series, I tasked Exceptional with trying to figure out Voltorb Flip. He made a whole spreadsheet for it. We also did a ton of research, finding this article on the Cave of Dragonflies, as well as this fantastic YouTube video, which describes strategies for beating Voltorb Flip. In the end, though, it always does come down to some degree of luck. So this is another instance of overworld RNG, much like random encounters. Coming back to the main goal, which is ranking every species accurately in every main series game, then this is another potential spot where things get really sticky. If I have bad RNG with Voltorb Flip, then that Pokemon's result is going to be negatively impacted by the fact that it couldn't complete this mini-game fast enough. But there's also a problem with the upside here, because if I have good RNG with Voltorb Flip, then the Pokemon might get an outrageously good result. Imagine a Pokemon just sitting down playing Voltorb Flip for a couple minutes, earning 4,000 coins, and then buying Swords Dance. That is of course so much better than the Pokemon that doesn't decide to participate in Voltorb Flip. Or so much better than a Pokemon that doesn't get access to a TM like Swords Dance. If I made it so that I couldn't play this game to restrict these TMs and remove the RNG from solo challenges altogether, then some Pokemon, like the Bayleaf line, would really struggle where they normally shouldn't. Because, as I have intentionally left out up until this point in the video, this line can learn Swords Dance, which is by far its best move. It doesn't seem fair to me to wall Pokemon off from their best move by arbitrarily restricting Voltorb Flip, but it also doesn't seem right to me to just play the game and have a whole bunch of RNG accumulate inside the results of each Pokemon. I would feel if I'm playing Voltorb Flip normally with RNG, that at the end of the solo challenge I would have to remove that RNG. This could be accomplished by adding or subtracting a certain amount of time from the result that I get with the Pokemon, but then why wouldn't I just remove that RNG at source? It doesn't make any sense to film that time into the run and then potentially have human error in calculating the final result at the end of the game. So after having Exceptional spend almost a week working on Voltorb Flip, and I have to say he went a little bit mad doing this, then I spent a weekend of my time trying to figure out Voltorb Flip, and at the end of all of this, we just mapped Voltorb Flip. We can now receive the RAM values in real time, and so when I enter into this game, my overlay is going to show me this beautiful little board on the left-hand side of the screen. So I know where every single Voltorb is, and I know where every single 2 and 3 is. By the way, you need to click on all the 2s and 3s, you never need to click on the 1s. The way the game works is every time you click on one of the numbers, it multiplies the total number of coins that you have earned that round by that number. So if I click on a 2, then I've earned 2 coins, and if I click on another 2, then it multiplies 2 by 2. The game progresses through different levels, and at each one you have a potential of earning more and more coins. The final level is level 8, and you have to get to it not just by winning the previous stage at level 7. You have to complete 5 rounds in a row where you turn over at least 8 cards in the round, and you cannot lose any of these. Although on the 5th round you can quit the game after turning over only 8 cards. Now, I anticipate that some of you right now are going to be seething with rage. You're going to be thinking that removing this kind of RNG from the game is just breaking Pokemon altogether and that I'm cheating. And yes, I am cheating. That's what we do here. I hack the game to give me a different starter at the beginning, and then I also hack it in so that I get perfect IVs and the hidden power of my choice. Of course, it's banned in these solo challenges. But if you want convincing, let's look at another fact about my solo runs. They are essentially casual speed runs. Now, viewed from this perspective, let's look at an official speed run by Worcester. This is him solving Voltorb Flip, and in this case, he knows the RNG seed he's on when he goes into the game, and as a result, he knows exactly where all of the tiles are that he needs to flip over to get to level 8 as fast as possible. I'm not gonna lie to you, I spent an agonizing amount of time trying to decide what my approach was gonna be for this section of the game in my solo challenges. I really didn't like any of the approaches on a philosophical level, but as soon as I saw this footage from Worcester, it clicked for me. When I give my Pokemon perfect or near perfect IVs at the beginning of the game, what I am essentially doing is I am saying that if there is RNG involved, involved in the creation of the Pokemon or in the overworld, I'm gonna give that Pokemon the most beneficial RNG possible. So at the beginning of the game, I give myself the best possible stats. Then throughout the next sections of the game, in my solo challenges for follow-up playthroughs, I turn off wild encounters to benefit the Pokemon as much as I can. And here, once again, I am just gonna solve Voltorb Flip, benefiting each Pokemon as much as is possible. I'm sure everyone is now getting tired of me talking about this minigame, but let me quickly talk about a few more things related to it. At the lower levels, you earn very little coins. For example, on board 1, I earned a total of 48 coins. Then on board 2, I earned 81. On board 3, I earned 144. On board 4, 243. And on board 5, which I exited to get to board 8, I earned 128. That is a total of 1,028 coins over the first 5 boards that I played. But the very next board that I complete gives me over 2,000 coins, bringing my total up to 3,620. At level 8, you're earning roughly 2,000 to 3,000 coins per round, and so these coins stack up very quickly. Today, of course, the most important TM to purchase is Swords Dance, which I teach to Bayleaf right away. Okay, that's it for Voltorb Flip. I am so happy this game is behind us. Now, Bayleaf is ready to take on Whitney. I think the only way I could lose here is if the Clefairy rolls something really good with Metronome like Sacred Fire. But I'm going to take my time setting up Swords Dance against it to max out my attack stat. At +6, I start my sweep. Razor Leaf is going to be doing the most damage, so that's what I choose, and I knock out the Clefairy in a single hit. Next is Miltank. I expected the same thing against it as long as I don't miss. I don't, Razor Leaf hits, and yes, Whitney's ace goes down in a single turn. Now, one criticism that I am expecting to see levied on these videos is that getting Swords Dance this early on trivializes the rest of the game. And I am going to have you know that HeartGold is way more difficult when compared with Pokemon Crystal. There are a bunch of trainers coming up that are going to cause problems even though we have this powerful setup move. The first one is the next major battle against the rival in Burned Tower. While he doesn't start with a Haunter like he does in Pokemon Crystal, he does have a Ghastly and it still knows Curse, which is the primary problem. If it uses this volatile status condition on me, then every turn I'm going to be losing 25% of my health. And that's a big problem because Synthesis only heals 50% of my health. This means I don't have time to set up past +2 with Swords Dance, and then the Zubat as well as the Quilava have moves that are super effective, the latter of which has Flame Wheel, which is a quite powerful move. Also, in Generation 2, you don't take any damage from Curse the turns you knock out Pokemon, but that is not the case in Generation 4. Now I am taking damage when I knock his Pokemon out. So by the time I make it to the Quilava, I only have 21 hit points left. I need to one-shot, and in this case, Razor Leaf does slightly more damage when compared with Headbutt, so I go for it, but just barely I don't have enough damage. I tried again with the goal of getting more Swords Dances set up using Synthesis. I'm trying to set up against the Zubat, as you can see, and it just really isn't working. I ended up taking a second loss here, which convinced me to go to the Lighthouse next to level up more. I don't know if this is the right choice. In retrospect, I could have used one rare candy to go over a damage rounding threshold and tried my luck against the Quilava again. I also could have tried to set up a second Swords Dance on the Ghastly because it doesn't really have powerful moves. But there is a third and far superior option. I should have taught my Bayleaf the Substitute TM in the place of Synthesis. This defensive move blocks Curse, and I am faster than the Ghastly. Remember, this is the second time in my entire life that I am completing HeartGold, so I didn't think of that in the moment and I still went to the Lighthouse. The training here brings Bayleaf up to level 32, where it evolves into its final form. As I said before, this brings a major stat increase, 20 across the board, but I do have to say I think Meganium is a small downgrade from Bayleaf in terms of aesthetic. I still like it, it's cute, it's a dinosaur, it's got a flower, all things that I like in my Pokemon. Grass types are one of my favorite typings overall, but I'm not really sure I like the antenna that are on its head. I far prefer Bayleaf and Chikorita's leaves. Like, where did the leaves go? They just turn into antenna? That seems very strange and wrong to me. Okay, important moment in HeartGold. This is Birdkeeper Dennis. He still exists, and he's actually a little bit easier to face because he's one of the spinning trainers blocking a ladder. Okay, with the Lighthouse finished, let's head back and face the rival in Burned Tower again. This battle is so much easier now. I can one-hit the Ghastly with Razor Leaf right off the bat, so it doesn't get a chance to use Curse. From there, I set up Swords Dance against the Zubat, and then sweep through the remaining Pokemon. With Burned Tower cleared, now it's time to head into the gym and take on Morty. This fight is technically a little bit more difficult than the battle against him in Crystal version. That's because his final Haunter also has Curse, so 3 of his Pokemon have this move instead of 2. To the best of my knowledge, the AI also does not have an accuracy debuff in this game, so Hypnosis is going to have its full 60 accuracy. That said, luckily the Gengar no longer has Dream Eater. This move has been moved to the first Haunter. I one-shot the Ghastly anticipating he's going to send in Haunter next, but instead he chooses Gengar. Okay, I wanted to set up Swords Dance before this thing came in, but I guess I'll just do it here, and that's fine, because the Gengar uses Mean Look, then it goes for Sucker Punch, failing, and after I get to +4, I one-shot with Razor Leaf. From there, it's just clean up, so yeah, an easy Morty battle. Okay, it's time to surf over to Chuck's gym. This is where I'm going to mention my final 2 HM users, Dratini from the Game Corner and Abra from the Game Corner. It feels really good being able to pick up both of these Pokemon consistently from the Game Corner in every run. Goodbye Krabby, we don't need you anymore for HeartGold. Chuck's gym is next. This one has had a massive redesign. You need to go up to the top and turn off the water so that Chuck is no longer like focused in a meditative state. But really when I look at him sitting there having water poured on his head, it just seems like some kind of strange form of torture. I'm hoping the water is at least warm, but it doesn't seem like it would be with the design aesthetic of the rest of the gym. Okay, let's get into this battle. It's gonna be an easy one. I have Swords Dance. Right? Okay, Primeape's first, and it is a lot better than it was in Pokemon Crystal. I set up Swords Dance turn 1, and Primeape uses Rock Slide, so it can flinch you. Also, if you're a flying type, you have to watch out for that move. On the next turn, I set up Swords Dance again, and Primeape uses Focus Punch, dealing a lot of damage, bringing Meganium to orange health. Now, I was overconfident here. I didn't heal before going into the battle, which I'm kind of regretting now. I would like to go to +6 before attacking the Poliwrath, but I just don't have time. So I use Headbutt and knock out the Primeape. Poliwrath is next. Now I have Razor Leaf, which is super effective, but I still wasn't sure if I would get the knockout. Turns out I was just being scared here. Obviously I have enough damage and his ace goes down. This is where I make my first major mistake of the run. I walk over to where Suicune is to fight Yusin. I wasn't sure if he was mandatory, and it turns out he is not. You don't have to come over here. And I shouldn't have, because I did not heal after the Chuck battle. Because of that, I was a little bit scared in setting up Swords Dance right away because the Drowsy has Hypnosis. I decided to just go for Headbutt, but it does not do enough damage, so I regret not choosing Swords Dance. Because I get put to sleep, Dream Eater chips away at me, and even if I did wake up, I would still not have the damage for the remainder of his team. I didn't save after Chuck because I don't have a habit of saving after major battles. In the majority of instances, it is just a waste of time. But this also gives me an opportunity to introduce something new for the channel coming in 2025. Well, coming right now actually for this HeartGold series, and for every other series in the new year. Whenever I have at least one blackout and resets, they are going to combine into a unified metric called faults, which will take the place of resets on my overlay. This is going to make things easier visually for all of you to track how many problems a Pokemon has had during one of these solo challenges. Okay, we're gonna skip ahead to the Rocket plotline, and I want to go through Meganium's move pool now, something I haven't done up until this point in the video. It has the same level up moves as Chikorita and Bayleaf, but its TM set gets slightly expanded. In addition to the regular normal type moves like Return, which I'm gonna get access to fairly soon, it also now gets access to Earthquake, a good coverage move. But like Pokemon Crystal, the TM for this move is available in Victory Road, so I'm not going to get access to it for quite a while. As a result, my moveset in the mid-game is kind of awful. Razor Leaf, Headbutt, Swords Dance, and Synthesis. The last of which I could replace with Substitute as I mentioned before. Razor Leaf just isn't that powerful, and as far as same type attack bonus moves go, it's really not that good. In tomorrow's playthrough, Typhlosion is going to get Flamethrower as soon as it reaches Goldenrod City. But with Meganium, the best physical grass type move that I get access to in the entire playthrough is Razor Leaf. This is it, everyone. So if you're thinking Swords Dance is going to make the game too easy, think again. Meganium's move pool is just really not that great. I anticipate by the late game I'm going to be running something like Razor Leaf, Return, Earthquake, and Swords Dance, and hopefully that's going to be enough. And just in case you don't know, this game is even longer than Crystal version, which is saying a lot. That game is already quite long. In this case, there are league rematches that I am now going to be doing, but we'll talk about them in a little bit. For now, I have to face Price. His team is a bit better than it was in Generation 2. Not by much. The Pilot's Point having a ground type move might change things a lot for an electric type like Ampharos, but other than that, I don't think he's gonna be much better. In this case, after one turn of setup with Swords Dance, I sweep his team. Okay, so what does Meganium have for Jasmine? This is the moment where I really miss having Hidden Power. Hidden Power ground would solve her, but in this case, I have to rely on just Razor Leaf and Swords Dance. Not a great set when going up against a Steel type trainer. In this case, I have to set up on the Magnemite too. I don't think doing it against the Steelix makes any sense. The consequence of this is that Meganium is going to be paralyzed for the rest of the battle. I make it to the Steelix with +4 attack, but this is not enough to one-shot with Razor Leaf. I don't even think +6 would be. After it heals with a Citrus Berry, I was fairly sure I would get the knockout with my next Razor Leaf, but I don't get a chance to. Paralysis prevents my attack, and then Steelix gets a critical hit with Iron Tail, knocking Meganium out. In the next battle, I push my setup all the way to +6 to ensure that I have maximum damage, and I'm also using Synthesis to heal before the Steelix comes in. With my attack stat maxed, as I said before, I don't have enough damage to one-shot the Steelix, but this time I have enough health and it doesn't get a critical hit, so I 2-hit even though I do miss an attack because of paralysis. That leaves only one Magnemite, and of course it's simple to clean up. Okay, so Jasmine wasn't that bad. What about Claire, who's coming up next? Well, first we have to get through the Rocket plotline. This is a boring section of the game, but I am very pleased to let you know that so many of the trainers that are mandatory in Crystal version are no longer mandatory. That means this section of the game is a lot faster in comparison, and it is a major quality of life improvement. Petrol at the top of Radio Tower is a little bit concerning. He has 5 coughing, all which no self-destruct and smokescreen. The latter of these moves is the one I'm really worried about. Plus, I'm also a little bit worried about getting poisoned by a move like Sludge. I set up to +4 hoping this would be enough, but it's not to one-shot the Wheezing. It's able to hit me with 1 Sludge, also inflicting poison. Meganium survives the damage with 1 hit point and gets off a Synthesis. Nice. Because of this, I'm able to heal and pull through with a victory against Executive Petrol, who is usually the most difficult trainer in this section of the game. The only other trainer I can think of that is usually as difficult is the rival in the Underground. But when you choose Chikorita as your starter, the rival has not yet evolved his Quilava into Typhlosion, because that evolution takes place at level 36, so it's still 2 levels too low. I didn't want to push my setup here with Swords Dance because the Golbat knows Confuse Ray, so after only 1 turn, I then start my sweep. I'm doing this with Return, which has replaced Headbutt as my go-to normal move on my current set. The rival's pretty simple here. The only Pokemon that survives a single hit is the Haunter, and it just barely survives. Still, it doesn't put a curse on me, and the Magnemite that follows is a one-shot with Return, even though it's resisted. As I send through Radio Tower, I want to draw your attention to the aesthetics of this game. I personally think they are very beautiful, and I think this is the best-looking 2D Pokemon game of all time. I consider Generation 5 to be 2D as well, but I personally despise that aesthetic. The moving sprites in battle and the camera just really doesn't work for me. I'll talk about it later when I get to playing those games in the solo challenge format. For now though, I'm just going to say the aesthetics in this game, amazing. I will talk about them in depth in a later video of this mini-series. Okay, so the final Rocket. He's really easy, like he was in Pokemon Crystal. Part of me wishes that they had given him a team of 5 or 6 Pokemon and really tried to make his team much more intimidating. Also, what's up with the Houndour and the Houndoom having the ability Early Bird? Isn't that a flying type ability? Like, I know it's technically not, they should probably have it, but maybe they could have just renamed the ability and given it to the Houndoom, something like Dark Warning. I think that would be far more fitting. Okay, with the Rocket plotline out of the way, now let's head through Ice Path to Claire's gym. We're going to talk about the puzzles at some point too in this series. I don't like this puzzle. This puzzle frustrates me. I know it's easy once you figure it out, but just like stepping on the right tile all the time, I make so many mistakes and this block slides around in the wrong ways. Anyways, let's take on Claire. Her team is quite a bit different than it was in Generation 2. Instead of having 3 Dragonairs, she now leads with a Gyarados. This is awful. It's the Crasher Wake treatment. Now I get hit by Intimidate before the battle even begins. The thing is, the Gyarados can't really do anything to me because its best move is Dragon Rage. I can counter this using Synthesis occasionally and then set up with Swords Dance. I go to +5 and I figured this would be enough. I one-shot the Gyarados, the first Dragonair, and then she sends in her ace Kingdra. Brief pause here, I just want to mention the fact that the Kingdra's sprite honestly is perfect perfect. It looks fast, it looks intimidating, it looks regal, and it no longer looks giant. Like in Generation 2 it looks really big. In this game it looks much smaller and more compact. I really like it. With Meganium's ridiculous attack stat, I knock it out in one hit, defeating her ace, and all that's left is a Dragonair, which of course doesn't stand a chance. Okay, here's a bit of an annoyance in HeartGold. I have to go back to Professor Elm's lab, talk to him, and then go and face the Kimono girls. I didn't mention them earlier because you don't actually fight them in the earlier section of the game. There's just one rocket that you have to take on. In preparation for starting my HeartGold series, I consulted with both Exceptional and Speedrunner0218 to get their thoughts on solo running these games. One key piece of advice that Speedrunner gave me is that after the Kimono girls go through their dialogue, just press B so that you don't go into the battles against them immediately. They're essentially like a little mini Elite Four where you have to battle them all in succession. And he said that they're quite challenging, so saying no, getting a save in, and then battling them is by far the safest way to play. Alright, we're gonna go through these battles one by one. First is Umbreon, and it's gonna take time to knock out because it's very defensive. One thing I didn't do before starting these battles was heal. As a result, I only have one synthesis left over by the time the Umbreon goes down. Second is Espeon, and I'm not able to one-shot, so it does some damage with Psychic before I take it out, leaving Meganium on orange health. Third is Flareon, and this is where things start to fall apart. It knows the move Fire Blast as well as Will-O-Wisp. I go for Synthesis, it misses a Fire Blast, but then on the next turn after surviving a return just barely, it goes for Will-O-Wisp burning me. This is quite bad because I'm not going to be able to get rid of the status condition for the remaining two trainers. Also with a burn, my damage is cut, so I'm not able to knock out the Jolteon quickly. Plus, it sets up double team, making things really awful. Luckily for me, when I finally do connect, I get a critical hit, knocking out in a single turn, moving on to the final evolution, Vaporeon. Even though I have super effective damage, Razor Leaf is weak enough that I am not able to two-shot, and as a result, because of my burn damage and the fact that Synthesis is out of PP, I take a reset here. I tried again without healing, probably not a good idea. This time, instead of getting burned, I get paralyzed by the Jolteon. However, without the burn, Razor Leaf is doing full damage, so the Vaporeon faints to a single hit. The reason I had to take on the Kimono girls is because the portion of the game where you fight the legendary at the top of Tin Tower is mandatory. Well, Tin Tower in Pokemon HeartGold, it'll be the Whirl Islands in Pokemon Soul Silver. In this case, I catch Ho-Oh with the Master Ball, but I should actually run from it to save the Master Ball for Snorlax because that is the only way to obtain the leftovers in this game. By the way, this silly choice is going to have a consequence later in the playthrough. Okay, are you ready for it? One of these terrible sprites that I mentioned. Look at Venusaur. What is it doing? It looks like it's floating. Its back leg isn't really connecting with the ground. It kind of looks like it's standing on its front legs. Yeah, I really don't like this sprite. Inside Victory Road, I pick up the TM for Earthquake, which I'm not going to teach to Meganium right away because the rival should be fine without it. His Sneasel that's first has Icy Wind, which is technically super effective, but Feint Attack's going to be doing more damage, so it's choosing it instead. Because it has no access to status conditions, I can just set up here with impunity using Swords Dance. Of course, with +6, I just sweep his team, the Typhlosion isn't an issue, and neither is the Magneton. Now, it's time for the Elite Four. I went into the battle against Will with the assumption that he was going to be easy, and I ended up being wrong. I can't really set up Swords Dance on the Xatu, at least not safely, because it knows Confuse Ray. Then for the Jinx, it has Lovely Kiss and Ice Punch, and I don't want to mess with either of those moves. Once his second Pokemon goes down, then he sends in his Ace Xatu, and it also has Confuse Ray, so once again I don't want to set up here. That's where things get a little bit sticky, because by this point in the fight I've taken some damage, and I've made it to the Executor, which is quite tanky. And it also knows Hypnosis in HeartGold. This is not a move that it has access to in Pokemon Crystal, so I didn't really see it coming. I end up getting put to sleep and taken down to red HP before I knock it out. Maybe I wasn't safe to set up there either. I don't know, I probably should have tried to get through this fight without setup. In the end, I have to go for Synthesis and heal on the Slowbro, and then eventually I am able to knock it out. I should obviously be choosing Razor Leaf here. I'm just a little bit thrown off because the fight didn't go as I was expecting. But still, Meganium pulls through with the first battle victory. Ironically, Koga ends up being much easier. It's ironic because I'm not using Earthquake, and I'm also weak to Poison-type moves, but the Ariados is just kind of trash. It is much better than it was in Pokemon Crystal. Now it has the move Poison Jab, but it still doesn't do enough damage because Ariados just isn't a very good Pokemon. As a result, I set up all the way to +4 and then return just basically crushes his team. Last he sends in Fortress. I don't have a good move for it, but it also doesn't have a good move for me. The only way it can deal damage is with Swift or Explosion, and it just chooses Toxic Spikes and then faints to only 2 hits. The man, the myth, the legend, it's Bruno time. This fight is basically the same as it is in Pokemon Crystal, with one exception. The Hitmontop does have counter, but its other moves are really awful, so I can just set up here again all the way to +6 this time, and that gives me an easy sweep on his entire team. Okay, let's talk about Karen. Here is where one of the trainers got a major downgrade, at least from a solo challenge perspective. The Umbreon is absolutely terrifying in solo runs of Pokemon Crystal. Even with amazing Pokemon, you can have 1 or 2 resets here. This is because it usually survives 1 hit and uses Sand Attack on the first turn. It generally follows this up with Confuse Ray or more Sand Attacks to be as trolly as possible. Its best damage dealing move is Feint Attack, and it very rarely chooses that. But in HeartGold, its moveset is changed in one dramatic way. Instead of Sand Attack, it now has Double Team, so it isn't affecting my Pokemon, which means I can set up here for free, then eventually luck out with a return and knock the Umbreon out in 1 hit. From there on out, my accuracy is preserved, making Karen so much easier. There is actually a really weird flip that's happening, and I've never noticed it before, so I want to explain it quickly. When the AI uses a move like Sand Attack when you're playing a solo challenge, that move is so much better than the AI choosing a move like Double Team. But when the player is choosing a move, it is so much stronger to use Double Team to increase your evasion, and it is so much weaker to use Sand Attack. The best way to boil this down is whichever move affects the solo Pokemon is by far more powerful. Whichever move affects the opponent's Pokemon is by far worse. Okay, so with Karen defeated, that's it for the Elite Four. Honestly, Meganium just stomped them. This was really easy. Now, I've held off on teaching Earthquake specifically because Lance is next, and as you will know, he's essentially a flying type specialist. At least for this battle. He does have an incredible team, and Exceptional told me that in his second battle, he's one of the most difficult trainers in HeartGold. Plus, in that battle, he is truly a Dragon-type specialist. But for now, I'm not going to change my moveset. Let's just go into this battle and see if Meganium can get things done with Return and Swords Dance. Like in Crystal, Lance still leads with a Gyarados, but this one doesn't have Rain Dance. Instead, it has Ice Fang, which deals super effective damage, but it's not doing very much to Meganium. It's actually nice that I'm defensive here. I can spend time setting up with Swords Dance, and that also neutralizes the Gyarados' Intimidate. I think by far Lance's lead here is better than it was in Crystal, and it could cause problems in the future, but not for Meganium. I set up to +5, and then I one-shot it using Return. Next is Charizard. It also goes down to a Return, and now the only question is, will the Dragonites survive? They are 2 levels higher at 49, but they also fall to Return. Aerodactyl, though, is much faster. It has 144 speed, which is more than in Crystal version. So it's going to hit a lot more Pokemon, especially because I don't have stat experience on my side. It goes for Aerial Ace. I survive with just less than half health, and then Lance sends in his Ace Dragonite. This one has Fire Blast. I metaphorically cross my fingers, hope for the one-shot, and Return does it. So all that's left is a weaker Dragonite, and of course it also goes down. Lance wasn't a problem, and with that, Meganium has beat the game. Well, the first part of the game. There's quite a bit more to talk about in HeartGold, and I have skipped a lot of things in this video, just because I want to save stuff to talk about in all of the other videos when it becomes more relevant. I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about the route in Kanto, because it is largely the same as what I do in Pokemon Crystal. Instead, for this video, I want to focus our attention on the gym leaders themselves once I arrive in the secondary region. First is Lieutenant Surge. Now, he's not going to be a problem for Meganium because of my typing, and I've also taught Earthquake by this point because Lance is behind me, at least for now. I don't even need any setup here to sweep Surge's entire team, so overall it's pretty simple. I will take this time while I finish off the rest of his Pokemon to just in the bottom right of the screen show you some B-roll from inside the gym. I have made one ROM modification here. So when I go into the gym, the first switch is always the top left can, and then the second switch is always the one just to its right. I couldn't find a way to make the doors automatically open without the ROM crashing entirely every time I entered the gym, so this was the best secondary solution that I could come up with. I hope by this point you have bought into my methodology and I don't need to describe why this puzzle needed to be removed from the game. Okay, next is Erica, and I really want to talk about her gym puzzle. It's awful. I'm gonna whine about it later. For now, let's just take on her team. Largely the same as in Pokemon Crystal, although they are all at significantly higher levels. So in Crystal version, the Tangela is level 42, the Victory Bell is 46, Jumpluff is 41, and Blossom is 46. In HeartGold, the Jumpluff is 51, the Tangela is 52, the Victory Bell and the Blossom are 56. And surprisingly, this ends up being a really close fight. With only +2, I am not able to one-shot the Victory Bell. Erica uses a full restore, I roll my damage again, but I still don't one-shot. I get hit by a Grass Knot going down to low-ish health, like roughly 1/3, and then she sends in her second Pokemon, the Jumpluff. Luckily, it goes down to 1 hit. She U-turned with it before, which is why I took damage. Blossom also survives, sets up Sunny Day, hits me with Solar Beam. Meganium survives with 26 hit points, and I move on to the Tangela. But I also can't one-shot it. I really should have set up here to +4 and just one-shot everything. That would have made this battle so much easier. In the end, though, she gets stuck in a healing loop, and eventually I come through with the victory over her final Pokemon. Alright, Misty. She's actually at slightly lower levels when compared with Erica, and because of my typing, I'm not going to have problems here today. Although the Lapras does know Ice Beam, and then it freezes me. Are you kidding? Anyways, I was hoping for a Defrost, and I do get one, but then Razor Leaf misses and the Lapras gets me anyways with Water Pulse. Okay, what's the chance that happens again? The reason I didn't one-shot the Lapras previously is because I didn't want to use Razor Leaf in the case that it missed. Then I realized I needed to use Razor Leaf, and at the key moment it missed. If I just spam the Grass type move, everything is more consistent. I end up knocking the Lapras out in 1 hit, so it doesn't have a chance to freeze me. With that, Misty is taken care of. Okay, I said before that it was going to come back to bite me, the fact that I used my Master Ball on Ho-Oh. So it's time to reflect on that decision making, because now I have to catch Snorlax using an Ultra Ball. I figured I should weaken it in order to do this, so I use Return. It does decent damage, but I needed to do a little bit more. So I go for Swords Dance, and then I use Razor Leaf because it has a slightly lower effective power. But something I haven't mentioned is Razor Leaf has a high critical hit rate, and it gets a crit in this scenario, knocking Snorlax out in 1 hit. I guess I don't have the leftovers for this playthrough. Like, I could have reset, but it would have cost a lot of time because I don't typically save in front of the Snorlax. Anyway, next time I'll just save my Master Ball specifically for here. If you didn't already know, you can just run away from the Ho-Oh, so that's what I'm going to do in the future. Okay, Brock is next. His team is bad. This team is just really bad, especially against grass types. Blaine follows him. Still the same awful team. I take 1 turn to set up with Swords Dance and get hit by an Overheat from Magcargo, but it only does about half. Granted, I'm not going to get hit by another attack because now I'm just using Earthquake, and I am faster than all of his Pokemon. Although only 7 points faster than the Rapidash, which has 143 speed. That's probably an important metric to remember for other slow grass types, or maybe first stage grass types. I can see Blaine causing more problems here than he does in Crystal because the Magcargo and the Magmar both have Overheat, and the Rapidash also has this move, but it also gets Flare Blitz, which utilizes its attack stat. Okay, Janine. She is probably the gym leader that has improved the most. She no longer has Pokemon in the 30s. Now though, her Pokemon are still only in the mid 40s, so by this point I am very over leveled, and that makes her simple to defeat. Okay, now it's time to take on what is typically in my Johto videos the second last trainer, Blue, but in HeartGold there are still 6 trainers to defeat after I take care of him. Okay, so his first Pokemon's Executor. This thing is awful. It sets up Trick Room right away, making his slow Pokemon fast and my fast Pokemon slow. It reverses the speed interaction. This is very bad because Meganium is faster than every single one of his Pokemon, even the Pidgeot. Also, I find it kind of weird in his team structure, the Pidgeot is last. Why? It's not his ace. The Arcanine is supposed to be his ace. Anyway, I tried to set up on the Executor, but it goes very badly because Executor is doing a lot of damage using Psychic. It lowers my special defense and then does even more. So I guess I need to sweep with +4, well, +3 because Arcanine comes in next and intimidates me. Then because of Trick Room, it moves first, hitting Dragon Pulse. Meganium survives on 1 hit point, but I misclick and use Razor Leaf. Whoops. So yeah, reset here. I tried again. Executor has Hypnosis, so I can be put to sleep and then knocked out with Psychic. Well, I do barely squeeze through, but the Arcanine just hits me with extreme speed. I wasn't really sure what to do here, like maybe it's time to use more rare candies, but that seems premature for me. I have heard terrifying things about Lance. Remember, Exceptional told me he's one of the best trainers in the game, and that has stuck in my mind. I want to save all of them as late as possible so that I can use them right before that battle. I tried setting up again, this time only at +2, then Blue switches out to his Rhydon. It does massive damage, taking me down to half health before I knock it out. Next is Arcanine. I luckily click on Earthquake, which one-shots. Pidgeot comes in. I thought Return was going to one-shot, but it only does half. Okay then. And Pidgeot whirlwinds me out, which is really annoying. Therefore, I have to switch back in because it's a solo challenge and I get hit by a flying move and this fight spirals out of control. Okay, so I did use rare candies, a total of 13, going up from 67 to 80 before trying again. Surprisingly, this time I get hit by Flare Blitz from the Arcanine and it does a lot of damage. As a result, Pidgeot's Air Slash knocks me out. That's not good, so even with rare candies, this fight is still challenging. I guess I need to really set up, so I take my time against the Executor and go all the way to +6. I got lucky here. I didn't get hit by a special defense dropping Psychic, and I also didn't get hit by a Hypnosis. As a result, I'm able to use Return and one-shot his lead. Arcanine intimidates, but I still have +5. I survive its Flare Blitz with 16 HP and use Earthquake to knock it out. Trick Room has now run its course, so I can one-shot the Pidgeot using Return, one-shot the Gyarados with +4 on Return, and then move on to the Rhydon, which I luckily don't miss against. Razor Leaf takes care of it, leaving only his Machamp, which is a new member of his team that he doesn't have access to in Pokemon Crystal. Instead, he has an Alakazam, which is honestly probably better because Machamp is pretty slow. I take care of it in a single hit, and now I'm ready to go back and do the League rematches. Before them, I'm just going to show you where one rare candy is because I need a little bit of B-roll. I just want to mention that these League rematches are not strictly required. I could go and face Red right away, but I am choosing to include them in these solo challenges because I think they make the runs more interesting and they also make the runs much more challenging. They also facilitate some training for Pokemon, leveling them up more before they face Red, because as I said before, his team is at higher levels in this game. You might think this makes the fight against Red a little bit easier, but I don't think that's the case. Plus, I really want to see how this Lance battle goes. Also, when you defeat him again, the credits roll for a second time, so I feel like this is sort of part of the gameplay experience that Game Freak would have wanted the player to go on. As a result, I think it's fair to include it in solo challenges. Let me know your opinions about this. Maybe I'll change this in the future when I start doing single species runs of HeartGold, but for now I like this approach. I think it's more exploratory and it's going to let us see some amazing battles. Will is first. His team is dramatically different. Bronzong, Jinx, Grumpig, Slowbro, Gardevoir, and Xatu. Thing is here, Meganium just doesn't really care. It's really overleveled because the rare candies I used before Blue, and I can also set up with Swords Dance as much as I want because Bronzong isn't very good offensively. From there, I just sweep. Koga's next. Skuntank, Venomoth, Toxicroak, Mach, Crobat, and Swalot as his ace? I didn't expect that one. Overall, this one's also pretty easy. I have Earthquake now. I set up on the Skuntank because it's not very good using a move like Dig, wasting time. Now, it could have hit me with a move like Toxic, causing me an early reset, but instead it goes for Dig 2 times in a row, giving me +6 and a knockout with Earthquake. From there, this is another sweep. Okay, Bruno, I went into this fight without healing. I was getting really confident by this point because the Hitmontop is just spamming counter. Yeah, his team, I sweep through it. He has a Hariyama and a Lucario now. It's actually his ace. Neat, but not effective when I'm using a Meganium with Earthquake. Last is Karen, and interestingly enough, her ace is now her Umbreon, which feels so fitting. She starts off with a Weavile, which is very fast, and it has Ice-type moves. I couldn't set up more than just +2 here, and hopefully that's going to be enough. Next comes in Honchkrow. It's pretty slow, return one-shots. Then she sends in Houndoom and Earthquake gets the job done. Spiritomb comes out next and it's very defensive. I figured that it was going to survive my hit with Razor Leaf, but it doesn't. But the following Umbreon, which I've said before is very defensive, does survive. It eats its Citrus Berry, then tries to set up Curse, which is a little bit terrifying if you can't 1- or 2-shot this thing. However, in this case I can, so it's not a problem. Last is Absol, and I one-shot using Return. Okay, strap in, buckle up, I don't know, grab a hold of something, because now it is time to take on Lance for a second time. I want you to quickly look at his team. Salamence, Gyarados, Garchomp, Altaria, Charizard, and Dragonite. This is a stacked roster. 4 of them are official Dragon types. He leads with a Pokemon that has Intimidate, and its moveset is stacked. Flamethrower, Shadow Claw, Dragon Claw, and Rest. Plus, if you didn't know, it's also holding a Lumberry, so if it uses Rest, it wakes up right away. I wanted to see if it was possible to set up here because I think I need it to counter out the Intimidate. So how much damage is Flamethrower going to do? And the answer is almost half. That does not leave me with high hopes for this battle. After getting set up to +1, I try for a return, and I get very lucky here, critting, knocking Salamence out in one hit. Charizard is next. It survives my return, uses its own flamethrower, and this one is powerful enough to finish Meganium. Remember back at Voltorb Flip when I said Swords Dance is not going to make this game trivial? Yeah, I used all my rare candies. I am level 83, and I am not able to defeat the rematch of Lance. And his Pokemon are still at much lower levels when compared with Red. Also, I have to play Typhlosion tomorrow, and what's it gonna do against this team? Like, Dragon types resist fire type moves, and it doesn't get anything that deals ice type damage. Needless to say, I am not looking forward to that battle. But for now, I need to solve this battle with Meganium, and it's also just sort of without a paddle. I can't learn Rock Slide for super effective physical damage against flying types, so I guess I just need to see if I can set up twice with Swords Dance and use Return. It turns out that I can. I'm on low health though, so from here I need to get one-shots. Salamence goes down, that's good. Charizard is next, and I'm able to finish it as well. Okay, what's he gonna send in next? Dragonite, because it has Fire Blast. I go for Return, and the bulky dragon survives on red hit points. That is not good. It attacks with Fire Blast, and Meganium goes down. Maybe I'm gonna have to wait until Fire Blast misses. I didn't want to rely on that, so what if I use a Chesto Berry in combination with Rest on the Salamence to get set up to +5? This does end up working out, and I was fairly sure this would give me the one-shot against the Dragonite. And hilariously, it doesn't. Dragonite once again survives, just on lower health, and knocks Meganium out. This is really bad. I might have to black out here and grind up to a higher level. If I heal more than once against the Salamence, then I'm going to lose, so that's not an option. However, if I time things out very well against it, I'm actually able to survive one more flamethrower, going down to red health and getting all the way to +6 attack. I figured this would give me the one hit on the Dragonite, and I was correct. Then he sends in Gyarados, lowering my attack by one stage back down to +5, but this should still be enough, right? I one-shot the Gyarados, move on to the Garchomp, and it survives with a sliver of health. You gotta be kidding me, this is awful. Outrage knocks out Meganium. I tried +5 again to see if it works against the Dragonite. Maybe I can set up later in the battle against the Gyarados, but no, +5 does less damage this time around. Okay, so here's a hilarious way to win, or potentially win. Against the Dragonite, it only has 5 PP of Fire Blast, so if I constantly spam Rest, it could miss, and it could also waste a turn with Safeguard when I'm at full health, not seeing that it can get the knockout. This is what happens. Because of that, I figured that I could stall it out until it no longer has Fire Blasts left over. If I can pull that off, then I can knock it out and have high health for the remainder of the battle. It takes time, and I'm definitely chancing a loss here to something like a critical hit. But luckily, Lance does not get one. Eventually, Dragonite starts using Safeguard as well as Hyper Beam, wasting a bunch of time, and I'm able to knock out his Dragonite at +6 with near full health. Gyarados is a one-shot, and then I roll better damage against the Garchomp, knocking it out in only one hit. If only I had got that last time. The final Pokemon is Altaria, but it doesn't stand a chance, so I one-shot with Return, and now there is only one battle left. I have to climb to the summit of Mount Silver, and this time it actually feels like you're going to the summit of a mountain. When I was a kid, I always thought that Red was inside the cave because you have to go further and further into the cave to get to him. But in this game, they make it visually clear that you're climbing up and up towards the peak of the mountain. Now, there is a special event that happens where it's called like Diamond Dust or something like that, where you don't take damage from hail, but in all of my battles, I am going to be fighting Red when hail is on the field. I feel like it's a unique weather element that we don't get to see a lot in HeartGold and Soul Silver, plus it has the potential to make this battle a little bit more interesting. So let's see how Meganium's final challenge goes. Up first is Pikachu. It's an electric type. It has Volt Tackle, Iron Tail, Quick Attack, and Thunderbolt. Much different from Pokemon Crystal. In this case, Iron Tail does a surprising amount of damage, roughly 1/4, and then I take chip damage from hail. I'm setting up here with Swords Dance, and I figured I could get at least one more in before I need to heal with Rest, or I need to attack. I have a Chesto Berry so that I can heal very quickly, and then resume my setup with Swords Dance. Because of this, I'm able to get all the way to +6 on the Pikachu before I knock it out. After hail damage, this leaves Meganium Meganium with just over half health when the Charizard comes in. Now, when initially thinking about Red, I was so worried this Charizard at level 84 was going to move first, but it only has 178 speed. That is 1 point less than what it has in Crystal version, and that is despite the fact that it is 7 levels higher. In this case though, Meganium is faster and I'm able to one-shot. From here things get very different because Red has a Lapras. It does know Blizzard, which is going to bypass accuracy checks in the Hail. This is one of the reasons the Hail makes this battle more difficult. Luckily for me, I one-shot the Lapras, and then we get to look at the Venusaur sprite again. Anyways, at least I one-shot. Okay, Snorlax is next, and it also knows Blizzard. Actually, Red's team is really stacked. I think if he attacks me one more time, I'm going to lose, because Blastoise also has Blizzard. I thought Snorlax might survive, but it's not able to. And that made me realize that Meganium has done this. Blastoise goes down, and I clock in with my first HeartGold solo challenge time. 3 hours, 10 minutes, and 57 seconds. With 21 faults consisting of 20 resets and 1 blackout at level 85 with a game time of 9 hours and 51 minutes. Okay, as a first playthrough of HeartGold, this game seems so much more fun to solo run when compared with Crystal. Yes, there are some quality of life improvements, but we still don't have things like automatic repels where it pops up with a little dialogue box saying if you want to use another one. I can't believe I'm saying this, but I have to wait until Generation 5 to get that mechanic. I'm just going to show one more ROM modification before I close out this video. So in Goldenrod City, there is a person on the 6th floor of the department store that has a very weird mechanic. She allows you to pay $300 for the chance to win a prize. You have a roughly 10% chance to get a TM, and then other than that, you'll either get a Pokeball or a berry. Since you can't pick berries anywhere else in the region, this is one of the most consistent methods to get them, but you only get specific berries on certain days of the week. Going back to the pause mechanic I mentioned before, I should be able to get any berry whenever I want because I could just pause the game and wait for the proper day. I could also get any TM I want as long as I spend enough money to get the 10% chance to receive the TM. And you can get this TM over and over again, so there's an unlimited supply. Because of that, I've implemented a significant change here, which is now whenever I talk to this lady, she just brings up a menu asking you which type of item you want. A TM, a Pokeball, or a berry. I select the option that I want, then she presents me with all of the options of items that I can get, and I just choose which one I want her to give me. This allows me to eliminate overworld RNG, like spamming a bunch of money here and not getting the TM for like 20 tries. That would just be a painful playing experience and negatively impact a Pokemon's results based on nothing to do with the species. I'm actually pretty proud about all these modifications that I was able to make to the ROM because I did them all myself. There are some other small changes that I'll quickly mention. I've made it so you can obtain return any day of the week, although I still will need to be over the friendship threshold. Another change I made is that I am always going to give myself the name Lyra, so that's just the default option when I exit out of the naming screen. Finally, I have also made it so that the game sets my options by default so that I don't have to manually adjust them. This does save a little bit of time because ordinarily you need to go through Professor Oak's dialogue before you open the options and change these things yourself, but I really just don't want to do that every time I play the game. These last two changes are the only two that I have made purely for convenience, and I also do have those same changes in all of my other series on this channel. So that's the beginning of HeartGold. I think this game is going to be really fun, especially when we start playing it with some bad Pokemon. And you know which Pokemon I'm really bad at using? Fire types. So tomorrow, we're going to see how Typhlosion does. And the day following that, of course, we're going to have to round out the starter trio, trying out Feraligatr. If you've made it this far, you are incredible. Thank you so much for the support throughout this end of the year. It really means the world to me. It has been a colossal amount of work pulling off daily releases this month. Now, if you have made it this far, you are incredible. I'll see you in my next video.